Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise, your moderator. The Woman's Connection is a program about events shaping women's lives and helping one gain authentic power on a personal or professional level. So won't you stay tuned? Welcome to the Woman's Connection. I'm Barrie-Louise. I don't know about you, but I've had things stolen and lost and damaged and didn't know how to get it back or where to turn to. Our guests today are going to help us resolve this issue. I would like to welcome Anna Kisluk from the Art Loss Registry and Elin Ewald from the Art Associates, Inc., and also Catherine Begley from the FBI. So welcome, ladies.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining me today. Why don't we start with you, Anna, and just tell us what exactly you're doing these days.
Well, I'm the director of the New York office of the Art Loss Register. And we are a private company which maintains a database of works of art that have been reported to us as being stolen. And I say works of art because most people tend to think of just paintings and sculpture. But we also have, and what is stolen are many other things. The kinds of things that you, in fact, would find in a home.
You're talking about clocks or watches or necklaces.
Watches, antique silver, you know, the tea set that maybe you inherited from your great-great-grandmother that has value that goes beyond the money that it represents. It has an emotional component to it.
Which is sometimes more significant than actually the monetary
Absolutely.
value.
Absolutely. It's a part of your family history or part of your effort. You're a collector. You've gone to a lot of trouble to collect that particular item and find it.
So you help.
So it means a lot more.
True. And you help everybody to recover it in one way.
We hope to. We hope to. We, as I say, have a database, and so people can register items with us. And what we also do is we check that against, for example, the upcoming sales at many of the major auction houses. And we get requests from people who are about to buy things so that they're not buying stolen art. And we find things that way.
Great. We're going to have to talk about that a little bit more. Alan, why don't you tell us about the Art Associates, Inc.?
Well, it's O'Toole Ewald.
Sorry.
It's O'Toole Ewald Art Associates Incorporated, and it's, I believe, the largest personal property appraisal firm in the city. We have specialists in fine art and decorative art, and all the things that Anna just described are the things that we identify and value. We have a specialty which is fairly unique to us in that it's so much in depth, and that's the damage, loss, and fraud cases involving fine and decorative art.
I'd like to talk more about that later. Okay. Catherine?
Yes, my name is Catherine Begley, and I'm a special agent with the FBI in the New York office. And currently I'm assigned to a squad that handles investigations of stolen art. And as Anna described, it isn't necessarily just paintings. It can be jewelry, furs, family heirlooms, manuscripts. And there are federal statutes that protect and get us involved with the theft itself.
Oh, that's it. I didn't realize that there were federal statutes also.
Yes, yes, there are.
I'll have to talk about that. Let's start at the beginning, and let's go to risk management. How can somebody protect themselves so that if, God forbid, it is stolen, it is lost, that they have an easy time of recovering it? Would somebody like to answer that?
Well, first, if you want a recommendation, I don't want to promote appraisals. There may be other ways to do it rather than to pay someone to do an appraisal, and one is to inventory everything in your home, everything that's major. That means taking a photograph of it and perhaps on the back of the photograph putting the measurements, the height and width of an object. It could be a painting or ceramics or glass, anything that you think has some value to you and you'd miss very much if it was stolen, or in New York, water damaged a lot, or burnt in a fire.
Well, let me ask, since you're taking photos, what about if you do it with a VCR, do a tape? Is that sufficient, or it's not as good?
Are you going to say the measurements as you go along?
Well, I don't
Because
know.
well, I mean, there has to be some identification of it. I think that's okay, but I don't think it's as good as still photographs, because you can have a close-up that's very special. If the item is stolen, you can then turn it over to the FBI in that case, or the police, or to your insurance company if you are insured.
Now, is it advisable to put like a mark on it? Because I know my mother received a beautiful sterling silver tea set for her 25th wedding anniversary, and she went to the police department, she got this engraver, came back, and put her Social Security number on everything. Is that good, bad, or shouldn't she have done it?
Can't be bad.
I don't know if it deteriorates the value. I mean, it makes it worth less, or...
Well, it depends on where it's put. I would say it might conceivably lessen the value ultimately, but I don't think really by very much. It's probably a very good idea. I know that you can also put something on the back of frames that will identify them more accurately, too.
And it's also a good idea with paintings to take the back of the painting. People don't think of that, but sometimes there's labels on the back of the painting that make it clearly identifiable. And it's a good idea to maintain the negatives from an investigative standpoint so that we can make copies.
What I'd like to say is that if you collect all this information,
Right.
store it off-site. Don't put it in the same place where you have the art. Give it to your attorney, put it in the safe deposit box. But someplace where something does happen, like
Like
a
a fire or water damage.
it's available. And thieves have been known to actually steal the records, too.
Oh, really?
And they have done that. So if you're, if it's a theft, if it's not there for them to steal, they can't steal the information either.
Well, let me just ask you, if they are stealing the information, would you say that a lot of these robberies are inside jobs, so to speak? Somebody is familiar with the person, or is it just a thief who is proficient in his business, or whatever you want to call it?
Many times it is an inside job where it might be somebody that knows the victim or has, I'm going to use the word cased the gallery, the home, and are familiar with the routine of the individuals involved. So usually there is an element of knowing the person involved. And sometimes it might be just a crime of actually just being there at the right moment of opportunity.
Because I know my parents' house was robbed, and the only thing that I would really like back from the house, I mean, there were a lot of things were stolen, but the thing that the most to me was this 22-karat gold pocket watch that my grandfather gave my grandmother when my father was born. And it's a pocket watch that's got 3 initials in it, so it's very identifiable, the family name, Switson, as well as my dad's name of W, my grandmother's name of J, so that it's really identifiable, but yet I have this feeling that it was somebody who knew me, who decided to rob the house one day, but there's nothing I can do to prove it. So it's like, as long as I'm talking about this watch, what would happen if I was at a flea market or a jewelry store and I saw this? What steps should I take to recover this watch besides, I don't want to buy it. It's mine. Why should I have to pay for it to come back to me? What would anybody suggest?
Well, my first suggestion, frankly, would be to go to the police if you had reported the original theft at the time of the theft to law enforcement, whether it's your local police, the state, the county sheriff, or whoever it might be, the FBI. There is then legal reason for somebody from law enforcement to come and presumably with some probable cause with the documentation of the theft to seize that right there.
Okay, so even if it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago. I
In
can
many
still
cases,
recover
property.
absolutely.
stolen property.
Stolen property remains, in general, in the United States. Stolen property is stolen property is stolen property, no matter how many years may have passed over the course of theft.
So let's stick with if we're at a flea market or a jewelry store, let's say, and you buy something. You go in with good intentions and you buy a watch, you buy a painting, you buy something. You, in effect, don't get good title to it, don't get provenance. Is that the right word? Okay.
Provenance.
Provenance? Oh, I keep thinking of the south of France. Okay.
Very nice place.
So how can you protect yourself in that case to make sure that you're getting good title?
Well, it's the issue of the buyer beware in a situation like that. Ultimately, it is stolen property, and it might become a civil matter where a judge would have to decide. It's called an interpleader, where a judge would have to decide ownership. But it is a problem, and you really want documentation from, I think it would be more of a problem with a flea market, where they got it from. And some kind of paper trail with the jewelry or the artwork. And you have to be beware of the situation, especially at flea markets or some of the auction houses, smaller auction houses.
Not just smaller ones.
I would say that, the usual sort of the very trite saying, if it's too good to be true, it probably is definitely one sort of rule that you should live by if you are buying things like that at flea markets. If you come across something which is worth a lot of money and you recognize it and the asking price is very minimal, you have to start asking questions.
Well, then would you, contact you? Or who would you contact? What steps would one take to make sure that you're not buying stolen merchandise?
Well, one step certainly is, as Kathy has said, is to get documentation from the seller and as much as possible. The other is actually to contact us. We can search our database to see if perhaps that item has been reported to us as being stolen, and we do identify things that way.
Now, let's talk about your database. Can anybody go into your database on the web and pull up and just check themselves, or is this a private website that you've got, or database rather?
It's a private standalone database. It's not on the internet. It's not accessible to the public. We have, of course, a lot of confidential information, needless to say. We have, the name of the owner, where it was stolen, addresses, telephone numbers. That's not the kind of thing that you want out there. But even in terms of the objects which have been stolen and which have been reported to us, you don't want the thieves necessarily to know that it's been recorded somewhere, because then...
Why? I don't understand that. It would go underground?
Well, that is one of the theories. The other theory is that, and we've had this happen actually, we've had someone who was eventually convicted of theft call us to see if it had been registered with us.
Really?
They were checking to see if the theft had been discovered yet.
Oh, so if it wasn't discovered, they figured that they were...
They put it, in fact, they did put it on the market, because in point of fact, at the time of the inquiry, the theft had not yet been discovered. So that is why we don't, for example, take anonymous phone calls, or requests for searching our database. You have to identify who you are with a phone number, address, and we don't give you an immediate answer. We answer only after 24 hours.
Oh, and that gives you
That
time...
gives us time
to do your research,
do our research if it's needed, and it also gives us time. We don't obviously check or do a ID check or what have you on the Inquirer, but it gives us a way to contact somebody back, so that the phone call isn't coming from a phone booth or some such thing.
I never thought about that. I always thought, well, if I wanted to buy something, why couldn't I just look it up on the web? But I never thought about the fact that you don't want it up there because it's too accessible for people to say, okay, put it underground or whatever the term is. I don't know what the proper term is.
Well, the other reason we don't put it on the internet at this point is that people don't want to become involved.
Yes.
And it's not just in this area, but in others as well. I'm sure you've heard a lot of the stories. Most of us have. And the tendency would be for people to say thank you, but no thank you, and no one would know that it had appeared on the market.
Oh.
And therefore, it might not be recovered.
Why? Okay, if it's skipping around a minute, I'm very curious about the fact people will steal the paintings. Let's just take the Gardner Museum, which is famous for the paintings that somebody walked in, am I correct? And just, well, they didn't just walk in and just walk out. But, no, thank goodness. But they still haven't been recovered. Now, they know that those are highly publicized paintings. What would somebody do with those types of paintings? Just keep them in a sealed room forever, or?
Well, they don't have to be that famous, but we do a lot of in-depth research at the request of various people or insurance companies, and we found paintings that were sold, that were missing, and that were sold to museums and to other highly visible persons or places. And it was only because somebody went to the trouble of looking for them because they went missing that it was found to be the case. The museums, in the one instance I'm thinking about, were very loath to even respond in any way. It was rather complicated in the end, and it was straightened out. But I think that paintings, or not just paintings, but lots of things, are sold that are illegally sold.
So therefore, somebody's taking the risk when they buy it.
Well, the New England Museum was robbed of the entire first floor of its objects about 3 or 4 years ago. And after about a year, most of those things were found. They were found, what was left of them, in a store in Florida. And a lot of them had been sold already. But there you go through a series of, what do you call them, the people who take fences. Thank you very much. Fences, yeah. There's a lot of stolen property that's floating around. People buy it, and very innocently. But I don't know how you're supposed to find out whether it's stolen or not. I mean, for instance, you take a Tiffany Favril vase or something. There might have been 300 of them made. How do you know that yours is stolen? How would you check that?
Well, that goes back to putting an identifying mark on it. What kind of a mark would you put on? I mean, not everybody can take an engraver and engrave like a china or a vase or something like that. Is there other kind of marks that somebody can put on?
Maybe ultimately everybody will mark things, but I don't think that you're going to have a museum marking thousands of objects going to that trouble.
It's too time-consuming, too expensive.
And perhaps dangerous to the object in some instances.
Now, we've got a card here. Anna, you want to talk about this? I think. Is this the Getty ID card?
Well, this sort of ties in with what Ellen was talking about. This was a project sponsored by the Getty Information Institute. They're related, of course, to the Getty Museum out in California. And the idea was to come up with a core data that would allow an object to be identified so that if it were stolen, the law enforcement person, could be the FBI, it might be Scotland Yard, a detective there, or it might be, your country policeman somewhere, who might come across the object would be able to identify it. And it's based on some very simple questions, which are on the back of this card, and it asks things like, what is it? A very basic question. Is it a table? Is it a vase? Is it a chair? Is it a painting? Who made it? When was it made? What was it made of? Are there any distinguishing features, a date, a signature, that kind of thing? And the one thing it does encourage, we hope, is that people will take photographs. Because as Ellen said, and I think as Kathy would agree, photographs in the end are what make the things identifiable. That's what allows you in the end to say, I'm 99.9% certain it's the same thing.
Okay. And anybody can get those cards? Or
well, they can get it from us. The Getty is now promulgating, if you will. This is the next step. They decided on the data, so now we want everybody to use it. And the Getty Information Institute can send people cards. And several, I know at least a couple of insurance companies are putting out this card, again, with their logo on it. This one happens to have our logo, but, you know, with the insurance company logo and the Getty logo on it. And it's a great reminder. And it also has, as you can see, it's got a color scale, color bar, a gray and white bar, and gray bar, and also dimensions in centimeters. So you can put this next to the object, in fact, when you're photographing it, and it's going to give you an idea of what the color is that you're seeing in the photograph.
Oh, how clever.
I wish I could take credit for this, but actually the director of the ID program, the Object ID program, Dr. Robin Thorne, designed this particular card. So he's the one who came up with what I consider a brilliant concept.
Oh, it's very brilliant, because the color is
One
like nobody sees
suggestion
blue the
is,
same blue.
and not my idea either, that in taking a photograph of an object, a lot of people will use a yardstick to measure it, so they don't even have to write it down on the back of that photograph. You can just see next to this clearly marked yardstick.
That's very clever, too. That's a great idea. Let's go back a minute on the appraisals. Do you register with, okay, you get the appraisals, you give it to your insurance company?
Well, I give it to the client.
You give it, sorry. I get an appraisal on my merchandise.
Yes, you do.
I give it to the insurance company.
Right,
So
with
that
the photograph.
with the photograph, and they have it all on record.
Right.
And then let's just say, God forbid, it gets stolen. Then they would give it to the FBI, or they would give it to law enforcement, or it's just...
I think you'd have to answer whether they'd give it to the, I don't think they'd give it
Well,
to the FBI.
we do work very closely with the Art Loss Register and also with insurance companies. And they will contact us. Here in New York, it's a good idea to also contact New York PD, the New York City Police Department. And I would say the Art Loss Register, because if it's something that means that much to you, you want to cover all the bases. You want to make sure that everybody's aware and can actually be working together so that recovery will occur. And our organization, the FBI, will take the information as soon as an incident, whether it be a burglary or a robbery, happens. And we maintain a database not only in the New York office, it's a control file of all thefts, but also we have a National Stolen Art file, which is removed from the Art Loss Register, but it's information that's shared among law enforcement agencies. So all law enforcement agencies, when they receive the information, they actually can trace back to where a crime occurred.
Wow. In the closing moments of the show, is there anything you would like to say? Anybody?
Well, I don't want to get too far away from theft, but what we're also concerned about is, as I mentioned, damage to objects or things just getting burnt up in a fire. I'm amazed at how many fires. I thought fires, when I first went into this business, in my mind, house fires and where houses were burned down, I thought was sort of a 19th century thing. But it's amazing how many houses still are burnt down and things are lost, and there's no record of them. I can't tell you how important it is for householders to maintain records.
And put them off-site.
Absolutely. There was one case where we did an appraisal for a doctor who had a large collection of rather valuable items. Some of them were very valuable, and he left it on his coffee table. He was so pleased with it, and he loved the pictures, and within 3 days he was robbed, and the thieves, of course, had this whole book in front of them, and they knew exactly what the most valuable things were to choose.
Oh my goodness.
That's what vanity does.
That is unbelievable. Catherine, is there something you would like to add?
Another area that, just to mention, a growing problem is art fraud, and especially with paintings and sculptures, where fraudulent artwork is being sold with certificates of authenticity. And there's appraisers, and the Art Loss Register can also assist in finding the proper person to appraise something, so that if you are investing money into a painting or sculpture or sometimes jewelry, that you're getting what you're paying for.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that.
It is a growing problem.
I'd just like to sort of sum up that a little bit, that when you are buying art, this is from the perspective of the buyer, the two questions you absolutely always should ask is it real? Is it right, authentic? And is it maybe hot, or is it maybe stolen?
Ah, very good. And if they say, of course they're not going to say yes.
No, but those are the questions you should ask yourself and investigate and look
Ask
into.
yourself, nothing. Okay. I thank you very much, ladies, for joining me today, and I thank you, and I hope we have helped you, and you don't have any lost, stolen, or damaged merchandise you have to worry about. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to seeing you again. Bye now. Tape media, courtesy of Quantity.